Hey there, welcome to my review of the 2005 wrestling pay-per-view from WWE, No Mercy. This is a pay-per-view that is well known for being one of the last pay-per-views that Eddie Guerrero did before he passed away. And I chose this one because it's one that I watched recently, and also because I thought it was a decent way to get back into doing wrestling reviews because it's a pretty straightforward pay per view. There's not a lot of really crazy feuds going on here. And it's something that I think is a little bit easier to jump into versus some of the other pay per views out there. Also, I have a fair amount of things to say about it, and there are a lot of opportunities for me to go on some entertaining rants. And I know that's something that a lot of people like when it comes to my content. I know a lot of you might not be really that interested in wrestling, and that's fine. I just decided to get back into it because it's something that I do get some entertainment out of. And keep in mind, this is all from the perspective of a super casual fan and a relative outsider when it comes to the wrestling business. Because, other than maybe a span of a couple years in my teens, I have not seen a lot of wrestling. So, a lot of this is me talking about these matches and these feuds, and a lot of this stuff that's going on with WWE or TNA or some of these other wrestling promotions for the first time. This is very different from what some of you might be used to when it comes to wrestling reviews because I'm not an expert. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an expert. I am a super casual fan who's just getting back into the product and just decided to make some videos and share my thoughts on some pay per views for fun. So, No Mercy is a SmackDown pay per view because this was around the time when there was a brand split and there were certain pay per views that were specific to a brand, either Raw or SmackDown. And this is a SmackDown pay per view. It was a event that was held at the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas, and only had like 7,000 people who attended the event, which is a pretty low number. And you would think that would lead to a low buy rate, but actually it did all right. It had 219,000 pay-per-view buys, so it actually performed better than the previous year's No Mercy. The pay per view starts out with a six person tag match. Yeah, the 6-person tag team match with LOD and Christy Hemme versus Eminem and Melina. And I thought the opening match, because I'm not counting the other tag team match that isn't even on this DVD. It might be as a special feature, but I didn't even bother to watch it because it wasn't something that was a part of the main pay per view. It was a match between Paul Burchill, William Regal, and Brian Kendrick and Paul London. And Paul Burchill and William Regal defeated Brian Kendrick and Paul London. But the opener for the pay per view was Christy Hemme and the Legion of Doom. But this was the LOD 2000 era LOD. And this is from the short lived time when LOD was still trying to be a tag team without Hawk, which I thought was just a stupid idea. I mean, how are you going to have the LOD without Hawk? You're just going to have Animal and replace Hawk with some other wrestler, especially when it comes to the wrestler that they chose to replace Hawk. You replaced Hawk with fucking Heidenreich. I mean, That's just disrespectful. That's just a slap in the face to Hawk and to the Legion of Doom and their fans to replace Hawk with Heidenreich of all people. And Heidenreich is a walking trash fire in this match. He's fucking useless. A dumpster would have more use than Heidenreich has in this match. He does nothing. He might as well have just stood there and had people in the audience throw trash at him because he was that fucking useful here. This match was really short. It was only like 6 something minutes, and it was a pathetic and lame way to start the pay-per-view. It made the pay-per-view begin with a massive thud instead of a bang, which I prefer when it comes to pay-per-views. I understand why you don't want to have your big main event match at the beginning. I get that. I don't want that to happen either, but I would like to have a fun match at least, or a match that provides some kind of impact that doesn't make me want to turn the pay-per-view off or press the fast forward button. Uh this was a pretty shitty tag match. They didn't really have any chemistry, the two teams. A lot of it was just Christy Hemme and Melina and the feud that those two were having, and it seemed like this was just a blow off for that feud, and they just threw in LOD and Eminem in there instead of just having the two have a match, which I understand why they wouldn't do that, because this is around the time when they didn't really put a lot of focus on the female wrestlers in the company. But it just leads to a very dull match that doesn't really have a really good amount of energy throughout it. There isn't a lot of big, great spots. It doesn't help either that LOD, at least this current incarnation, with Heidenreich and Animal with one arm, it doesn't help that they are so limited in the ring in terms of the spots, in terms of what they can do. And Eminem, they're not a bad tag team from what I've seen from them. Joey Mercury and Johnny Nitro, they have a good connection with one another. They are talented. They have some nice moves in terms of their move set, and they can put on a good, exciting, fun tag team match. But that just wasn't the case here. And the most memorable thing about this ultimately forgettable opener was Christy Hemme doing the demolition device to end the match. And that's it. The second match on the card is Bobby Lashley versus Simon Dean. This is a squash match for Bobby Lashley in his pay-per-view debut. It was somewhat interesting to see Bobby Lashley in his pay-per-view debut, to see a young Bobby Lashley jump into the business and try to make his first mark on the wrestling crowd, as well as WWE as a whole. But it's exactly what you think it would be. Simon Dean's a jobber. He shows up, gets squashed by the new up-and-coming talent and Bobby Lashley, and then a good chunk of it's just spent on the comedy gimmick, which was to force feed Simon Dean 20 hamburgers. That's really what this whole match was set up for, is to set up this running gag throughout the pay-per-view where Bobby Lashley would force Simon Dean to eat hamburgers. It's as hilarious and as interesting as it sounds. Bobby Lashley, I'm not gonna be too harsh on him because it's a very early pay-per-view match. It's a squash match for him. But at the same time, I think it would have been better if they had him fight someone in a legitimate match for his first pay-per-view, and instead of something like this. Now, I'm saying it's his first pay-per-view, but I could be wrong. Keep in mind, I might make mistakes. This is an outsider's perspective, a total casual. I am no expert on WWE or who started when and any of that. So I could be wrong, and if I am, feel free to correct me at any point. But uh, for one of his first matches, it's not really that impressive. It shows his athleticism a little bit. Definitely shows his power and his strength. But, it's only a minute and 55 seconds. There's only so much that you can really show in that amount of time. I wish that he had a match more closer to what Mr. Kennedy had in the same pay per view, where Mr. Kennedy went up against Hardcore Holly, and it was not a really crazy long match, but it was long enough where you were able to really get a picture, at least a more full picture of a wrestler's talents, instead of what you saw here with Bobby Lashley. It was just like blink and you miss it kind of stuff. The fourth match on the card is a Fatal 4-Way match for the United States Championship, featuring Chris Benoit, Booker T, Christian, and Orlando Jordan. And I would say, other than the match between Rey Mysterio and JBL, and maybe the match with Mr. Kennedy and Hardcore Holly, this is the other match that I would say is the most noteworthy on the card, not including the main event, which is easily the most noteworthy and easily the best match on the card. Uh, this match had its moments. All four competitors, they got their spots in. They got to show their individual talents in the ring. I know a lot of people really don't like talking about Chris Benoit, and I get it. But for me, Chris Benoit, at least at this time in his life, was not the same Chris Benoit that committed those horrible acts. I'm not going to sit here and say that those two are one and the same, because that's not the case at all. His brain was pretty much mush by the time all of that happened. I'm not absolving him of what he did. He is absolutely 100% a murderer, but I think it's more complicated, and I think there's more to it than people try to make it out to be. A lot of people just like to say that Chris Benoit is a monster, and that's it. No questions asked. He should be forgotten about. He should not be talked about, and I just don't really agree with that. Chris was a very talented wrestler. He got over for a legitimate reason with the fans, and like I said, the Chris that is in the ring here is a very different Chris than the one that committed that series of murders and ultimately killed himself. And I just refuse to not get some enjoyment or some appreciation from this Chris Benoit in a match like this in the Fatal 4-Way. Although, I mean, Fatal 4-Way match with Chris Benoit is just something that just has not aged well at all. But that's just due to hindsight, not at the time, because Fatal 4-Way was just the term that was used for these kind of matches. But it is something that's unfortunate in hindsight, for sure. But yeah, it was a fun match. It wasn't too long. It was the right length at only like 10 minutes. It seemed like Booker T, Chris Benoit, and Christian, they really took up the bulk of the match because they were the more accomplished and more talented and more well-rounded wrestlers than Orlando Jordan. And it ended with Chris Benoit winning, which I didn't necessarily expect considering the fact that it was a four-way match. A lot of times when you see these kind of matches, it's a prime opportunity for some new up-and-coming star or someone that the company's trying to push to win the title and still have the current title holder have a place in the hierarchy. have them still be firmly in the mid card, or in the mix for another title, or in the mix for a rematch or something. And it was a little bit surprising that Chris actually did overcome the odds and won. And he won with a submission maneuver. He made, I think it was Christian. He made Christian tap to to a submission. Um, yeah, he forced Christian to submit with a sharpshooter, and he won the match. The next match after that is Mr. Kennedy's pay-per-view debut against Hardcore Holly. And I had a lot of fun with this match. It was a good showcase of Hardcore Holly's talent, his tenacity, his forceful style of wrestling, as well as the brash style of Mr. Kennedy. I always liked Mr. Kennedy. I think it's really too bad that he basically caused his own career to flame out for various reasons. Also, it's too bad that the whole illegitimate son angle for Vince McMahon didn't really pan out the way that they initially intended, because from what I've been hearing, Mr. Kennedy was supposed to be in that spot instead of Hornswoggle, or all these other potential suitors, and it was supposed to be a big push for him, and he fucked it up, and then they had to go in a different direction. But for a certain amount of time, Mr. Kennedy was something refreshing, something cool, something legitimately enjoyable when it comes to the product. Yeah, he's brash, he's immature, he's over the top, but that's a big reason why he got over. His whole entrance with the microphone and the whole bravado of it was very unique, and he wasn't that bad of a wrestler either. I thought he had some genuine talent in the ring. The move that he does to win this match, I thought was one of the best moves of the night. He completes his finisher off the top rope. I thought that was a really nice looking finisher, and it definitely packed quite a punch. And yeah, he performed a Green Bay plunge off the top rope, and he showed various other talents by showcasing different submission holds and different stuff like that at his disposal. And it was a fast-paced, fun match to watch between two guys beating the hell out of each other, and with almost said JBL because that's the next match. And I always kind of have JBL in my mind because I fucking hate JBL, but I'll get to that soon. But it ended with Mr. Kennedy victorious. Speaking of JBL, that leads us to the next match on the card. JBL with Jillian Hall versus Rey Mysterio. I am a huge Rey Mysterio mark. I have been ever since I was a kid, and I hated and absolutely despised how Rey was treated by the company during this era. I hated how they handled his title run. I felt that was just absolutely abysmal. One of the worst botches I can think of when it comes to a title run by the company. He won the title. It was a huge, big moment for Rey, for his fans, and for the company. And what does Rey get in return? One of the shittiest title runs ever, because he never was put over as much as he should have been. He spent way too much of the time getting beat, quite often clean, and embarrassed on SmackDown or the other weekly shows. And then on pay-per-views, he would lose to wrestlers that were nowhere near as talented or nowhere near as over as he was, like JBL. So it was just a total waste, and this match was more the same for me, because it was one of those things where they had to give JBL back his momentum because he lost so much of it, because this was after he lost the title. And I'm like, it was a mistake to even give him the title to begin with. I mean, is there anyone out there that's like, I love JBL. I can't wait to buy the Best of JBL Blu-ray. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who was a fan of WWE who was like, man, JBL is one of my favorite wrestlers. For good reason, because he fucking sucks as a singles competitor. As a guy who was a part of a tag team like APA, he was fun. He was a big, tall, badass guy. He worked well with Ron Simmons. It was one of those things where, okay, that is something that could work. And I felt that the two had their definite moments in the Attitude Era that were pretty memorable. But when he was rebranded as JBL, this a big, loud, arrogant Texan, it didn't work. I didn't. For me personally, it didn't work. I know there's some people who do like it, and saying that there's no one who's a fan of JBL is a little bit much, because everyone's a fan of someone. But I just didn't get into this character. I didn't get into this run. And as a heel, I didn't hate him because he was doing such a good job, like Edge or some of these other heels around this time. I hated him because I just didn't like watching this guy wrestle. I thought he was stiff. I thought he was limited in the ring. He also has one of the worst finishers out there. I mean, it's not as bad as other finishers like the Great Khali's Claw, but it's still pretty fucking awful because it's a clothesline. You can add from hell to the end of it, and that doesn't mean that it's anything other than a fucking clothesline. It's still a clothesline. It's a lame finisher. You don't buy it that he just clotheslines someone and that's enough for him to get the pin. Because for a lot of other wrestlers that I've seen in the past and seen footage of, there were big guys who delivered clotheslines, but they weren't finishers. Why the hell is JBL's finisher so devastating? It's still a clothesline. Oh, but he jumped back into the ropes. It's still a fucking clothesline. That would be like if John Cena had a finisher where he did his shoulder tackle thing where he bounces off the ropes and hits somebody with his shoulders, and that would be a finisher. It's lame. And if that doesn't make things bad enough on its own, JBL's bad on the mic. He's just fumbling and stumbling, and he was just as bad when he became a commentator to the point where he became a meme. I just never bought it. JBL, more like jerk off butthole muncher. So yeah, JBL faces Rey Mysterio in this match, and Rey tries the best he can to carry JBL's sorry ass and makes it a somewhat entertaining match, and then JBL wins, and then I'm like, fuck this shit. Why do you keep fucking Rey over? And especially to give the rub to JBL. Like, JBL seems like he was just a company guy. He was one of Vince's boys or someone behind the scenes, and they really liked the guy, and he kissed enough asses to get his position on the card or with the company, because it doesn't make any sense that he was really that over with the fans, because I don't really remember seeing a lot of people being like, JBL, man, I can't wait to see the next JBL match. I don't remember that. And I also don't remember people really being like that enraged at him either. They were just indifferent with the guy. They were like, can we see someone else as a heel? Can we see someone who can actually do more than a few moves in the ring someone who has an actual finisher. Can we put Rey Mysterio over? Can we actually give him the win here? Who the hell wanted to see JBL win? Except for JBL and some of the people behind the scenes, and maybe his very small, minute number of fans at the time. But I understand the business, how things are, is that you have a certain feuds, and you can't have one wrestler win all the matches and so on. But in this instance, it's like JBL just is not someone who's gonna stand the test of time, and I just think it was a mistake to give him the win here. He already won the title. He already had his title run. Just let Rey win. I don't really see the negative by letting Rey win here. And it doesn't help either that this match is really marred by the commentary team always commentating and always pointing out the mole, the gross looking mole on Jillian Hall's face. That whole thing was just disgusting, and the epitome of lazy when it comes to writing. Oh my god, she's hot, but she's not because she has what looks like a plate of oatmeal on her cheek. I just I don't understand the writing or why they even had that as a story, and it's just there for Taz and Michael Cole to just gawk at. And it's distracting. It's distracting from the match. It's bad enough that Rey gets beat by JBL with his stupid finisher, the clothesline from hell, but then you have this ongoing thing where they're trying to push this ugly mole on the side of Jillian Hall's face. Why you would want to push that is beyond me, but you know, WWE is not really a company that would stray away from that kind of storytelling. I mean, it's the same company that had I think it was Mae West yeah, I think it was Mae West deliver a hand. So it's the same company that did that. So it's not that crazy that they would push an ugly mole on someone's face, but it's just an ugly look in more ways than one for this pay-per-view and for the company at the time. Like, oh look, laugh at the woman because she's so ugly. Like, after the match between JBL and Rey Mysterio, you have Randy Orton and his dad Bob Orton in the first ever handicap casket match against the Undertaker. And this match went on way too long. 19 minutes felt like 39 because Bob Orton, he's a legend, but he's old as dirt at this time. And that's no knock against him. I mean, he's an older man, so he's limited in what he can do. But that just makes it a very boring handicap match because you have a guy who can't really do much. So then it turns into mostly Randy Orton going up against The Undertaker. And it tries to throw in some stuff by having Bob Orton use a fire extinguisher and blind The Undertaker with it. And I had some fun with it for, you know, the typical Undertaker spots like Old School and the Last Ride and stuff like that. And it did end in a way that I honestly wasn't expecting, with Randy Orton and his dad going over in Undertaker's signature match. I mean, that was a pretty big deal for Randy Orton to go over in that way. Of course, he does it with the help of a steel chair. He doesn't do it in a way where he actually beats the Undertaker clean. And I would say probably the most iconic moment of this match is not even really the match itself. It's the moment afterwards when Randy and Bob light the casket on fire. And that's the most iconic moment when it comes to this match. That's the thing that most people remember from it. Not one of the Undertaker's best matches, but not one of his worst either. Like I said, it did feel like it was 39 minutes or 29 minutes, because there was a lot of stuff where, it just kind of was going through the motions and just trying to have everyone try to get some of their spots in and so on. But it was still an okay match on the card. The eighth match on the card is Juventud with Psychosis and Super Crazy versus Nunzio and Vito. This is a cruiserweight championship match where Juventud won. WWE really dropped the ball when it comes to the cruiserweight division at this time period, because you had a lot of talented cruiserweights who, a fair number of them, made their mark in WCW. They come to WWE. WWE has a cruiserweight division, and it's really turned into a mockery, a joke, an afterthought. And having Nunzio be the man who was carrying the title for as long as he did just shows you how much of a joke this division was. Nunzio is a jobber, plain and simple. Nunzio is every bit of a jobber as Santino Marella, and he was carrying the title for months. And it wasn't until this moment when Juventud finally won, who was a much better wrestler, a much more talented wrestler. And it's nice that he did get that moment where he won, but WWE didn't do much with that. Didn't do much with Juventud. And it seemed like he was being buried by the commentary team anyway, because they're all talking about he's the Jews and blah blah blah. It seemed like Taz and Michael Cole wanted to talk about anything else other than the match they were calling. That's another thing that I didn't like about this pay-per-view. The commentary. Michael Cole and Taz is a deadly combination for the viewer. They are toxic. They are like oil and water, and they don't work together very well. And the match, it is what it is. Nunzio's very, very limited as a wrestler. So Juventud had to do all the heavy lifting, had to pretty much do everything in order to make this match even a match that would last 6 minutes. So it's not great. It's not very good. I've seen worse matches, because at least Juventud is showing his athleticism and showing his ability. But when you're up against someone like Nunzio, like, what can you really do? And the final match is the main event, the singles match for the World Heavyweight Championship, Batista versus Eddie Guerrero. It's the one that's not necessarily the longest. That is the casket match, the handicap casket match. But it's the one that, to me, is hands down the best. If you're going to watch this pay-per-view, you should watch it mainly for this match. It was one last moment of brilliance from Eddie Guerrero. I love this angle that he was going for here, where he was trying to turn a new leaf, but he was also still tempted by his past of being the I lie, I cheat, I steal, I win, that kind of Eddie. And that turmoil that was going on with him throughout this match, where he would have an opportunity to get the upper hand by cheating, but then he would decide otherwise, was brilliant. It was great storytelling within the match. It kept you engaged consistently. And then you have the friendship, the connection between Eddie and Batista, which had already been there long before the match. So there was just a lot going on with this match. And then the two, they put on one hell of a match. They put on one hell of a show. They had good chemistry. They had all their signature spots. You had Eddie doing the frog splash. You had Batista getting his Batista bombs in and his spine busters, and I think he might have gotten a spear in, and they had the counters and the false finishes, and it was everything that you wanted it to be, and then some. It didn't end in no DQ. It ended with Batista winning, pinning Eddie clean, and then Eddie actually shaking his hand, and it was a really good match. I would say it's probably a pretty underrated match when it comes to this era of WWE pay-per-views, because it's just a really well put together match. The storytelling is great. There are a lot of good, fun, big spots between the two. Eddie doing the Three Amigos, and it was a great moment for the two of them, for Batista and Eddie. And it was a great way for Eddie to go out. I know that really wasn't the intent for him to go out like this, because the plan was to have him continue on. Really, the plan was to have Eddie continue the feud with Batista, and he was actually going to win the title again. That was the plan that they had going forward. But of course, they couldn't do that because Eddie died of a heart attack in November of 2005. Eddie was going to go back to his heroic character, and then he was going to win the championship, and it would have been a great moment for Eddie and for his fans. But sadly, it just wasn't meant to be. And this was also a match that took place on Eddie's birthday, because they sang happy birthday to Eddie in the arena, which was another just great special send-off to Eddie, to have his fans and Batista just start a birthday chant for Eddie. It's a pay-per-view that is not that great. It's firmly below average. Has some matches that are definitely better than others. One match in particular that's the biggest highlight of them all, which is the main event. I wouldn't say it's something that I would completely skip, or something that I would say is 100% forgettable, mainly because of the match between Eddie and Batista. But it is a pay-per-view that I would say ranks fairly low on the list of pay-per-views that I've seen. It's not the worst. As bad as this is at times, I would rather watch this again than a lot of the more current WWE pay-per-views, but that's just me personally. And yeah, I'm glad I watched it ultimately for that main event, because that main event was legitimately something special. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my review of No Mercy, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.